Hello, thank you for joining me for the Consent and Kink workshop. That's why I'm talking to us now, I'm not going to lie. However, we have Colin has produced a banner and about it and be aware that we're going to ask people if they should wish to, after the workshop, to get photos taken in front of it, to demonstrate that we attended it at the workshop, that we are all on board with how important the message has been considered. But firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Poppy. Otherwise known as the senior counsellor. Occasionally, also got a private therapy practice called Dixon Wellbeing. I think most of you might have been in my healthy mental practice workshop a little bit earlier. But for anybody who hasn't attended that workshop and doesn't know who I am, that's who I am. Thank you for joining me today for this workshop. Is everybody aware that this isn't the general mental health HMP workshop? This is the clear on consent workshop. We're all in the right space, so we're all happy to be here. I guess one of the things that I will say when I start this workshop off is that it has been running for a little while now. It started at LAM, at London Alternative Market, and a lot of the content was written by the teacher again. So a lot of this is her material, it's her workshop, and I think what we're hoping to happen at the end of this is that there will be a page that the QR code scans to, links to, and it has more information that we'll be able to find. And this is the first time that I've ran through this workshop. I've seen it and delivered, so I'm doing that age-old practice of see one, do one, teach one. However, I've taken a few notes, and I love the workshops, I love this kind of stuff, but I am a little bit nervous, I'm not going to lie. Only because she said that she'd like me to deliver it and just be like, else to do this. It's a little bit of pressure on me in terms of getting it right. But I'm sure as we go through it, it'll make sense to everybody. It will become a little bit more natural. So I guess my question to you guys who are here and who have attended the workshop is, what do we mean by consent? What is consent to everybody? What do people understand by the word consent?
Permission.
Permission, thank you. So yeah, permission. Anybody else? Any buzzwords around consent?
Agreement.
Agreement, yeah, agreement, permission. Anything else?
Mutual understanding.
Mutual understanding, yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, anything about mutual understanding? Anyone else?
Alignment of intent and goals.
Okay, alignment, intent, goals, and shared picture, I guess, shared understanding of something. Anyone else got anything that springs to mind when we mention consent, when we talk about consent?
Limits.
Limits, okay, yeah, limits, that's part of it. But all of these things will come into what we're talking about a little bit later on, and I agree with you, they're all very important words, but they make up something that's quite sophisticated in terms of talking about consent. Do we have anybody else? Anybody else got anything that springs to mind when we say the word consent?
Informed consent.
Informed consent, yeah, really, really important. Yeah, when you
Trust.
trust to have consent, yeah. Anything else?
Boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah, I guess boundaries is part of the concept.
Adaptable.
Sorry?
Adaptable.
Adaptable, okay, so changeable, changes, alters, yeah. Anyone else? So do we all think that we have consensual BDSM relationships in the room? Are we all in BDSM relationships? Do we? I know there's a lot of new people here today. How many of us, show your hands in the room if you're happy, how many of us have engaged in BDSM practices? Some of us might be. So pretty much all of us, or most of us, have engaged in BDSM practices. So it's all about BDSM being consensual, guys. By that, I don't want to obviously trigger any difficult memories, but for the most part, do we think that we engage in consensual ethical BDSM? You do? I do. Anybody else?
I agree with that. I do, but I
We do.
always
We're all
like the same back.
Yeah, we're all great with consent, we're all in this room for a reason, we're all really keen to develop our skills, our understanding, our knowledge, and that's why we're here and we're all getting right. Well, we're all wrong. You're really sorry, you're stopping from the start, we're not. And I'll tell you why we're not, because ultimately you cannot consent. You cannot give consent for a huge swathe of the practices that we participate in. And that always comes as a massive surprise for people when we do workshops like this, when we talk to people like this. So how many of us have given a hickey baby? Given a hickey or a little bit beyond that? Given an arm? Yeah, all absolutely non-consensual, by the way. right? Yeah, we're all aware of that. So when I say that, I say in the UK, as things currently stand, we cannot consent to violence against us. There is no such thing. It's not legally permissible. It's not a thing. It's not possible. Yeah? Is anybody surprised by that? People surprised that we can't consent, yeah? So, UK law legislation, there's three main acts, parts of legislation that impact what we do. I don't know all of them, I don't do the news at the law workshop. However, there's three main parts of it. Things are changing and moving along, but the underpin and test case, what we do at the moment is Brown versus Spanner. And what that basically says is we cannot consent to anything beyond transient and trifling. So anything that leaves a mark is beyond transient and trifling. So if we're given hickeys on a regular basis, we are engaging in non-consensual acts of BDSM because we can't consent. Now, however, consent and ethics and law are all very good. And that's, I guess, what we're going to talk about today. But I always start with that revelation because there's always somebody in the room who goes, it's all right to do what we do as long as we consent. And I've got it right, and that somebody wants me to flog them and wants a bruise and wants a mark. And we've all got our phones on us, haven't we, in our pockets? Yeah, we've all got phones. So how many of us in our pockets have got a phone with a picture of something legal on the basis of that information? How many of us have got bruises, marks, things that we've done? How many of us have got logins saved on our phone automatically to FetLife, Facebook, social media profiles that has got content that is essentially legal on there? Yeah, right, so we're all going to run out of the room screaming now and then come back to my workshop. It's scary, okay? However, my phone is not. However, I think we have to be very, very careful of what we have. And we do live in this world now where we take pictures of everything, we have pictures of everything, it's not a picture of it, it didn't happen, you know. Question everything when it comes to pictures, you know, question it. The amount of things that I see that are water bondage, that are fabulous imageries, that are rope, that are suspension, they're not real. You know, there's oxygen canisters there, or there's three people holding someone up in a really good photographer taking a money shot. You know, lots of these things are not real. Question me, question the people sitting in front of you delivering workshops. Why am I delivering this workshop today? What am I sat here for? No, clients get a little kudos. I enjoy doing it. I'm doing this one because, quite frankly, someone I really, really respect and admire and loves asked me to do it and said, oh, you want me to do it? Do you mind going and doing it? I'm shit to myself. I wrote notes. I've never had notes for about 15 years when I've done a talk, but today I've got notes because it's the first time I've delivered it. So it's really important to me to do this workshop. It's really important to me to get it right. Does anybody know that in the room? One of you might have had a guess as to why I'm doing this workshop. The rest of you don't know that. Motivation matters. Why does somebody want to play with you? Why is somebody in front of you doing a thing? You're going to give me your time. It's only right that you know why I'm here. What am I doing this for? What's my motivation? What's driving me? And I think that's an important message to remember. In terms of those photos that we have, I'm not saying, you know, sanitize your phone, sanitize your life, have two profiles, have a name, have a this, have a that. But I think we have to be realistic and we have to be careful about what we say we're consenting to. Because lots of things that we do, we can't consent to. And the reality is, 9 times out of 10, there won't be an issue, but 1 time in 9, you know? People have a lot of kudos, a lot of influence, a lot of, you know, we're all travelling now, we're all getting on aeroplanes soon, we've all been locked down, none of us have been able to go anywhere for the longest time, we're all booking flights, the airports can't cope. Board security have some of the tightest rules in the world. Where are you travelling to? You know, what are the rules of the country that you're travelling to? If you've got images on your phone that are illegal here, and you're travelling to somewhere else, maybe you want to delete some pictures of them. You know, maybe you want to have a think about that. Maybe you want to, you know, for me, there's controlled medication in my suitcase because of some of my family members. That alters where I can travel to. I literally don't travel to some countries, even with a letter from a GP, it's still going to be illegal, and then carries a life imprisonment. I'm not going to go there. So you're not going to travel to some countries that are going to sue you to death if you're traveling to this country. In person. So we have to be really, really careful and really sensible. So that great start to the session. Everybody who thinks we're doing everything wonderful and consensual and actual fact going on. And hopefully that has opened everybody's mind. It's made us think that, you know what, maybe we don't know what we think we do know. And if you're engaged in BDSM practices and you don't know anything about the Spanner case, you've never heard of Spanner and Brown, I suggest that you go and have a look into it. So basically what happened, we're still stopped because it's not what the workshop is about, but it was a BDSM scene involving men, it was gear males having a BDSM scene. They were drilling nails into his cock, so quite on the picture, quite hardcore BDSM scene. However, actual fact that cock did have some piercings in it. What they were doing is they were hammering nails through piercings. But there's no two ways about it. It was CBT, cock and torture. Videos of this found, it was taken to court. People said, no, this is an absolute consensual act where we're great, we're okay with this. They prosecuted anyway. Do you know what did they in the end? They were trying to demonstrate that it was consensual. They brought the video footage in. It was not the prosecution that brought it into court. It was the defence that brought into court the video of this act happening that clearly determined that this was consensual and everybody in this set scenario was happy, wanted the scene to take place, and that was what the conviction was based on. Because up until that point there was no concrete evidence, it was just hearsay that it actually occurred. How do you prove that this happened? The video footage is what nailed it. Absolutely, crime had been committed because we did not consent to violence of that nature against us. So there has been other, that was a number of years ago now. Things have moved on. There have been a more recent case, interestingly involving a heterosexual couple in Harvard where there were some pictures found. They both went to court and said, look, this was absolutely consensual, and there wasn't a judgment made against them. So times are changing, but that is still the law. That's the law, and that's the test case behind it. Yeah.
How does that work? It's like boxing then.
Boxing, so there is a very, very specific piece of legislation that means that you can consent to injury for sport. So sport is outside of that. Cosmic will probably know a little bit more about this. Maybe we quite often do this law workshop. However, you can quite legally get your head kicked in and lose your life in a boxing ring, and that's absolutely fine. And karate and things like that, it sits outside of this piece of legislation. We're talking about the Spanner case and obviously the boxing.
Offences against the Persons Act of 1861.
61, there you go. So the figures of legislation, that legislation specifies very specifically certain instances where you can consent and it's sport. However, I mean, that's interesting. Would we get away with saying, are we going to find flogging and caning as an Olympic sport in the future? I don't know.
Now, I'm going to say at this point, I think it was 2005 when I attended the Fetish Olympics just south of London. So we have had a bash at this, but they really didn't give us any grace on it. But there we go. We had a bash, and then there were some good competitions running. I mean, the three-legged race with poly couples, that was amusing.
I think the other thing that I want to talk about as well after that is obviously retroactive consent, because I think that's a big issue at the moment. And what I mean by that is we've all talked about what consent means to us in the We've all said it means agreement, it means saying we want to do something, committing to it. There's loads of words used around the room that we said, I want to do this. And ultimately, that happens. But what happens after that? What happens when we do something and then a little bit later on we think, shit, that went a little bit too far, that's further than I thought it was going to be, that I'm not happy about that, I've got bruises, blood was drawn. We have a lot of scenes where people think rightly or wrongly, and we will talk a little bit in more depth about how we obtain that initial consent later on, but we have lots of scenes that people think that consent has been expressed, and then for whatever reason, a mixture of complicated ones, usually psychological rather than physical, somebody decides a little bit later on, I shouldn't have done that. And we call that retroactive withdrawal of consent. And that happens quite regularly in the scene. Statistically, it happens 7% of the time when it comes to interactions with people, in terms of when people make claims that something happened, consent was obtained, they're not happy about it afterwards, they say, I'm not happy about this, 7%. Now, I think that's high in the BDSM scene. I know that that's something that other people like Debs, she speaks quite openly in this workshop, she says exactly the same thing. In her 40-year span, my 20-year span, I think it happens more than 7%. And I think that's quite often to do with the nature of what we do. I think it cultivates more guilt, it cultivates more shame, it cultivates more, fuck, what have I done? What are people going to think of this? How am I going to be perceived? How am I going to be judged? Ultimately, sex in general can have those thoughts. You know, we can think, oh my God, I fucked that person and I wish I hadn't, they're married or they're not particularly attractive or have you goes on and I'm not happy about that. You know, but we do that little bit step further. You know, we do things that ultimately afterwards we think, shit, what have I done that for? I'm not happy with this. And that's why it makes it even more important that we have a really good idea that consent in terms of how we understand it, that ethical consent as opposed to that legal consent has been obtained. And it's been obtained to the best of our ability. And that's why we're here. What I will say is that I think ultimately, percentage-wise, there's more people who do have a situation that is abusive versus non-abuse as opposed to people who make retroactive withdrawal of consent. But it is an issue, and we'll be pretending that, you know, we're doing a disservice to pretend that it wasn't an issue. It absolutely was an issue. So, you know, I think we need to be really aware of that. Does that make sense to people in terms of what I'm saying and what I'm describing? So in terms of consent, how do we go about getting it? What do we do? How do we ask somebody to, I don't know, beg, fuck, go for dinner, watch that Disney film that we know they're probably going to refuse to watch because they don't do Disney?
I do Disney, but only Song of the South.
You out with yourself there. I didn't out with there, you out with yourself, so there you go. So ultimately, how do we get consent? There's loads of us in the room, we're all saying we're doing these things. Well, most of us put our hands up and we've said we're doing it consensually, we think we're doing it consensually. So how are we doing it?
Communication.
Okay, communication. So how are you doing that? How are you?
Talk to someone, you can talk to someone, you can have that communication.
Yep.
To find out what it is that they're okay consenting to.
Okay, so you talk to somebody about what it is that they want from you, what their want is in terms of sin, and you do that with words.
Yes.
Okay, practice this. What about other people? How are we getting consent in our relationships, the things that we do, what we're doing? Yeah.
Getting to know them, talking to them.
Yeah.
Communication.
Building relationships.
Yeah, relationships.
Yeah, okay, that's what we're doing. What else are we doing? Anybody else? Anybody else doing anything other than saying, I want to fuck, how do you want to fuck? Anybody else doing anything else?
Negotiate, say what you like, dislike, and then hard limits.
Okay, so you're telling people about you. So you're part of information, yeah, about this is who I am, this is what I like, this is me. Yeah, okay, brilliant, thank you. Anybody else?
Like experimenting and finding limits and then backtracking from there,
Okay,
discussing where your limits are,
okay, so
by finding them together.
you're finding your limits and then backtracking from them. Oh, controversial. Okay, we've got some.
But I guess that's the only way to find a limit is to do it and then be like, oh, that was my limit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of impact then, so is that what you're talking about? So you're perhaps having a structure like maybe red, amber, green, is that fair? You know, we're close to where I'm happy, I'm amber and that kind of, is that what you mean? Just more to be able to go? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Anybody else? Anyone else got any ways up there?
I would say for less sort of like severe, like for example, first or like if you're dating somebody, you know, sort of a kiss that can be almost implied as well, like some actions.
So implied consent, and I guess that's another big one, isn't it? So for me, I'm in an established, committed relationship. So a lot of the consent that I gave might be implied. So I might, my leg and someone think, oh, is he going to take that? Am I, is that going to be okay? Or am I, I know people. I don't know everybody here, but I know people.
She normally looks me better than this.
Before, and I don't know if Madam, or they've got like similar hair, and that was very different, wasn't it? Very, very different. Different response, different interaction, different permission was sought, and all we do was touching somebody and they hand. I don't know how people are with hands. And we talked about informed consent as well. You know, if I'd gone up to these people, probably both of them to be fair, because I know this person, I know they can be a little tricky, but if I'd gone up and said, I've just been in the bathroom and I've not washed this hand, I haven't. Wash this hand and I've just been to the toilet and can I touch your hand? I would fully expect a completely different response, probably from both of them, but particularly from the person whom I have no interpersonal relationship with. I expect they're going, no, you absolutely cannot touch me, wash your hand, you filthy animal. Yeah, so that's where the informed part comes in. What actually are we asking for from somebody? And I think that's really, really important thing to remember. Some people, even some people who I know really well might say, you know what, no, don't touch me, I don't want to be touched, contact's not okay. Particularly at the moment, just through the pandemic at the end of the day, touch is significant. So I think we've all touched on some really important things in terms of communication skills in the week. What I will say is that what we're doing every single day, that looks like it's, bog standard kinds of all these words that we float about, so we do that all the time. There's a model for that. There's a model for everything, isn't there? Everything that we do is a model. And one of the things that I really like is the wheel of consent. The wheel of consent is really fun. Is anybody in the room familiar with it? Apart from you've seen the wheel of consent. You're not familiar with the wheel of consent.
I haven't, no.
You've not been in this workshop before?
I have, but I don't remember that.
Really?
Yeah, it's been like 3 years since we did this.
Oh, now I'm panicking. I'm doing it all wrong.
It was discussed but not printed last time.
So, yeah. I've not seen it. That was the question. I've not seen it.
Okay. So ultimately, just making sure that one's good before I got to this bit. So one thing that I will say that I haven't mentioned is our capacity when we're aroused. So I guess when we're getting consent, when we're obtaining consent is really important. So we've touched on the fact that some consents imply, some consents are explicit, that we always gain consent, but when are we gaining consent? And this is really, really interesting point actually. And recently there was a little bit of a, let's just use the word hoo-ha. There was a bit of a hoo-ha. Somebody gained consent post scene. They had a scene, they were in that nice spacey part, they wanted to do something else, somebody else actually wanted to do something else. They said, can I do something? Somebody said, yes, you can do something. That person had just finished playing, had just finished the scene. Now, there's a real ethical conundrum around that consent. Now, personally, I think consent was there, was present. Was it somebody asked, somebody said, somebody did. So, in the truest sense, consent was there. How freely was that consent given? That's the issue, and that's what we'll come on to with the bracket that I'm going to use. We talk about not giving consent when people are under the influence. So under the influence of drugs, under the influence of alcohol, when we are aroused, we make really, really, really shitty decisions. We think, yeah, I want to do that, I want to do it hard, I want to do it fast, and I want to do it twice. Then we get close to doing it, and we think, fuck me. Yeah, changed my mind. And what do we do when we change our mind? And what do we do when we're aroused? And if we're a person who was obtaining consent from somebody, do we recognise when somebody makes some decisions? We talked earlier on about fawning, didn't we? We talked about fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, friend, foe. If you were not in that previous workshop, you don't know what I'm talking about. Quite often we say yes when we're boring or submissive. We want to please, we want to serve, we want to do all those good things for people. They make us do things that perhaps we might not do. So there's instances where we do obtain consent, but with hindsight, was that the right time to go about doing it? Was that really correct? And there's other times, when we just have a clusterfuck. We have a clusterfuck all the time. And the obvious one is, for how many people in the room own a vagina? How many times has there not hit the vagina and have they hit the ass? Have we ever had that? Has anybody had that unfortunate? I'm going to be honest, it's happened to me, happened to any other vagina owners in the room. Yeah. It's fucking awful, right? And hopefully you turned on. And we're joking about it. It can cause serious repercussions. It can cause epileptic seizures. It can cause, some really significant things. And I really don't want to stress anybody in the room, but I don't consider myself to have been any way raped. I don't. Certainly not in that instance. I consider myself to have been on the quite literally receiving end, the rear end of a clusterfuck. Something that has gone wrong. something that I really hope doesn't happen again, and something that I understand that he wasn't fucking very happy about. We have a conversation about that, we have a communication about that. If we're going to have sex like that again, in that context, in that way, maybe we're going to use weekend mode just in case. What have we learned, what we're going to do about it, right? That's very, very different as a clusterfuck. Do we know the difference between consent, clusterfuck, retroactive withdrawal of consent, and just being a fucking cock? Because quite frankly, there are situations where people are just cocks. It's not illegal, maybe it should be, but people are just cocks. How many of us want to be in a relationship? We want to have sex as part of a relationship. I saw this talk to a client very, very recently, and their faith's really important to them, They don't want to have sex before they're in a committed relationship. It's really important, it's really sacred. And they had a really unfortunate encounter with somebody recently, not in the BDSM, but they dated them for a while, it was for a few months, and they had, as Beyonce says, put a ring on it. They put a ring on it, they offered commitment, they offered, in their mind, engagement. There was sex, not long after that, the relationship ended. That person found out that person had been engaged 4 previous times in the past 2 years. They dated people who are faith-based websites. Is that okay? Is that ethically okay? Is that moral? Is that ethical? No, it's not. It makes that person, in my opinion, and I'm going to share it, I don't even care, a fucking dickhead. But it's not illegal. What they're doing is not illegal. It's morally not okay. But we consensually say, do you know what? I want to mark you. I want to give you a bruise. I want to kick your ass. And I'm so excited for it. And you want nothing more than me to kick your ass. And we know each other. We've known each other for a while. And we like each other. And we're both on board with this. And this lovely person here has actually brought a spiky bench from us. And that lovely man out there saw an implement that we can do it with. And we're going to do it. But it's illegal. I would argue it's far more ethical than the first situation I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. Those things don't necessarily matter. So I think what we have to do is we have to be aware of the law and the ethics. They're not always the same. They're not always aligned with each other. So that's my message to you in the workshop. Anyway, I went on a tangent there. That's what I do when I'm left to my own devices and I put the book down. I think I'm better with the book, but I'm not. I'm actually better with the book. That's right. Anyway, the wheel of consent. So for anybody who's not familiar with wheel of consent, it's a little bit not great for the room. So I'm going to speak and then I'm going to pass it around. If anybody doesn't want it to be passed around, touched it, by all means, just let it skip over you. I understand, but I am going to pass it around. I think we're at that stage of the pandemic hour, we can do that. But what I will say is ultimately, we think quite often, and people who are very familiar with this, I'm not going to assume that it's not, but we think quite often that there's 4 parts to obtaining, 2 parts to obtaining consent. There is the asking, the can I, can I touch your hand? Yeah, you can touch my hand, absolutely, you can touch your hand. And there's 2 parts. We're quite happy with that, usually. We know that consent involves that transaction, But what the wheel does is it breaks it into 4 parts. What I want, what I'm prepared to give, what the other person wants, what the other person is prepared to give. Does that make sense? It's not just me and then there's an actual fact 4 elements. Those elements have to align, That's where negotiation comes in. I know what I want, I know what I'm prepared to give. So again, I was talking in the workshop earlier on, ultimately, if you're someone who has a foot fetish, or you're an anal fetishist, and you've got someone who doesn't want to do that play, that's absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but the chances are it's not going to work. It's not going to work because ultimately what somebody wants and what you're prepared to give don't align. So I think you can break it down into 4 rather than 2, that can be really, really helpful. And that's really consent. I really, really like that in terms of, may I? Will you? Yes, you may. Yes, I will. So what are the 4 things? And do we know ourselves? That was what I was saying earlier on. I didn't realise actually until I looked over, I'm going to be honest, I looked over a previous workshop because I haven't attended one and I felt a lot of pressure to get this right away. So between the 2 workshops, I went and I looked over the past one. Not all of it in that time, but I flipped through and I had a look at what was said in the previous workshop. And the reality is a lot of what was covered in that workshop, by second chance, even though I really tried, people who were here, tried to avoid topics that might be duplicated, steered away from that, a lot of it was covered in the previous workshop. And why was it covered in the previous workshop? Because a lot of what I was talking about was identity, about knowing ourselves, about knowing what we want and how important it is. And that links in so closely and so tightly to consent. Because do we know what we're offering? Do we know what we want? Do we know what we're looking for? Do we know what we're prepared to give? Do we know what we're not prepared to give? We don't know the answer to those questions in terms of ourselves at present, our identity. It's really, really difficult to have conversations about consent, negotiation, what's okay, what's not okay. So if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I don't actually know, don't know what I want, that's where I would start. What do you want and what are you looking for? Quite often Kink talks about this user manual. People who are old enough to remember the Haynes user manual in terms of used to have them for cars. I think that's really important. It's a really good starting place to get to know who you are and what you want. If you're not familiar with that, I always recommend people look up DBT. You know, DBT it talks about core values. What are your core values? Do you know what your core values are? Map times 6. What's your core value? Well, I want to be a good person. That's what you've got to do. What's a good person? What's a good person? You know, I've done lots of things that I certainly wouldn't want my parents to know about, or want my kids to know about, or my boss to know about, but I think I'm a good person. You know, what does that mean? What are your core values? Can I get some more examples? Have a little look at this and ooh, these shoes are really nice shoes. Oh, silly. I'm going to fall on my arms. Right, come see all this, and then I covered it when I was on frequent. Right. So the next thing I want to talk about in terms of consent is another handout. Not seen these. It's like blue handout. Well, that goes with how this one. Fries. Have people heard of fries? We've had lots of models for consent over the years. We've had lots of models, thank you for that. We've had loads and loads of models of consent over the years, and it's funny that I'm being asked to do these workshops now, and I love doing this workshop, but we've kind of moved on. So we had RAC for the longest time. Are people aware of RAC? Risk aware, consensual, kink, and really out of date and old. And then we had things, you know, that we should be, you know, safe, sane, and consensual. That was when I first came. Because that means it's in military. So I feel a little bit like I'm stuck in the past. So this is great for me. This feels a little like a CPD for me to move on. And of course I am aware of what FRIES is. FRIES has been around for a long time. But FRIES is where we're currently at. So when I was around, everyone was going, oh, SSC, or RAC. I'm hoping people who are quite new to the scene now, or finding BDSM, or who are on FetLife, or reading really, really good writings on consent. And by the way, if you haven't read Kink Shrink Debs' very comprehensive writing on consent, suggest that you do, and we'll definitely want to write because that's linked through from the QR code when it's live. It's a fabulous bit of writing. Please take time to go and read it. Yeah? But what I will say is people who are talking about and doing writings, which I don't do, and probably should do more of, and I will see that we're going to be a resolution every fucking year, is FRIES. So we're all aware of it, we're all heard of it. So I guess what I'm going to do is talk through the concept of FRIES. Because fundamentally, I think, people who run this workshop think that this is the correct and best and most appropriate model to be used at the moment, yeah? So it talks about freely given. What do we mean by freely given anyway? What's freely given?
Not coerced.
Not coerced, thank you. Yes, not coerced.
Not during kidnap.
Not what?
Not during their kidnap.
Not during their kidnap. Ha, ha, ha. What about if that kidnap's been planned for the best part of 3 years?
Then it's a play scene, not a real kidnap.
Okay. So freely given. So freely given is not coerced, and I think that's fair. What do we mean by not coerced though? Coerced is a big word. What can anybody kind of go a little further? What does not coerced mean?
Kinds of coercion. It could be like financial coercion or emotional coercion. You know, there's a whole person. When it's something about when I guess a form of pressure or something. There's not like there's a lot of ways that can.
And that's, again, as I say, I just covered a lot of this in the previous workshop, right? You really try not to avoid it. And there was a question about what happens when I'm in a relationship where I've been falling for a long time, I'm not great in that relationship, it wasn't a great relationship, I haven't had to spend that time again. And ultimately, what we were talking about was consent that was not really different. There was no difference. And we get that all of the time. Not just in BDSM, not just in sex, not just in kink. You know, we find situations where we're coerced all of the time. Yeah, I did a shift the other day, I didn't fucking want to do. Why the hell did I give it? Why did I do it? What can I do? Or somebody asked me and I wasn't in a place. Is our consent freely given? Can we say to somebody when they ask something of us, can I think about that? Can I sleep on it? Can I get back to you? And I think that's a really interesting point that we were looking earlier on about consent that was given as part of the scene. For me, my personal rule of thumb, because I play, you know, I'm lived experience, I love the scene, I'm a big perfect like the rest of you. For me, if I'm asking something of somebody and they can't say it to me, let me have a think about that. Let me go away, let me talk, let me sleep on it, let me ponder, then it's probably not freely given. So if it's, I want to stick 25 needles in you in about 10 minutes time, you're good to go, yeah, get yourself on that bench, find your pants off, right, go. Unless that's somebody I know really, really fucking well, we've done needles before, I know how they're going to be with the needles, you know, we are in an established relationship, then that might be alright. Otherwise, it's really not okay. It's not freely given, is it? It's not, I haven't been able to think about, I haven't been able to know. If you're drunk, you've had too many drinks, you know, some of us here have a 3-drink rule, some of us here have a no-drink rule, I have a no-drink rule. Why do I have a no-drink rule? That you know why I have a no-drink rule? Some of you do, come on, you can say.
Apparently, the drinking alters your brain.
Yeah, alters your brain, alters perception, but why do I personally have a no-drink rule? Do you know? And if you know, you've got permission to say it. Okay, do you know why I have a no-drink rule? These people are supposed to know me, I'm so disappointed. We don't need doing this again.
We don't talk about playing together like that though.
No, we
haven't had that discussion.
Why do I have a no-drink rule, no pressure?
I don't know the exact reason, but I suspect it's similar to my reasoning, and that's that people will generally agree to things while they've had a few drinks that they wouldn't necessarily outside of that.
And he's right, people will agree to things that they wouldn't necessarily outside of that. For me personally, I've had gastric bypass surgery, so I lost a lot of weight, and it's very, very unpredictable how I will be. Sometimes I can have 1 or 2 drinks, I can get behind the wheel and I can drive. Sometimes I can have 1 drink and I look like I've had a bottle of vodka. It's really, really good, and there's nothing I can do about that. So for me, I never drink and drive, and I never drink and play. Am I okay for somebody who knows themselves, who has consistency in terms of how they will be, having 1 or 2 drinks, maybe even up to 3, and playing with them? Yes, as long as that's talked about and it's negotiated. For me, I can't have consistency. So if I can't have consistency, it's unpredictable, so it won't be freely given, yeah? So no drink, no drugs, no coercion. Coercion, we talked about that, no psychological coercion. If you don't do this, then. If this doesn't happen, I might play with somebody else rather than you. I'm going to play with my other person I play with. Or if you don't do this, I'm not getting my needs met, so I'm going to. Very, very subtle ways of coercing in relationships. Are we free to say no in the relationships that we're in?
I was going to say the worst one I've heard so many times over the years: if you loved me, you would.
If you loved me, you would. How many times do you say that? If you were a real submissive. Yeah. My last submissive did. How many times have we heard that? Anybody heard that?
2 minutes.
Anybody? Yeah? Do we hear that? It's not okay, guys. It's not okay. It's not freely given, is it? It's worse like that. Ultimately, what we're talking about is going back to the wheel of consent. You know? What do I want? What am I prepared to give? What do they want? What are they prepared to give? And if we're getting what we want from something that they're not really prepared to give, but we're having to offer some kind of emotional incentive, okay, those games can be fun, they can be fun, and I'll be honest, I have played them, but you have to be really careful. They're not the games that we play outside of a long-term committed relationship where we're acknowledging that's the game we're playing. If we're not saying, look, we're playing these games, we're playing the game of coercion today, remember daddy's dirty little slut. If we're not naming that, then it's not okay. You know, if you can't say to somebody, this feels like coercion, and they say, well, it is coercion, and this is why it's coercion, and this is what I'm getting, this is what you're getting from it, are you okay with this game of coercion? Same as kidnap, then it's just fucking kidnap. If you put someone in the back of your van and they don't know that you're putting them in the back of your van, you're just kidnapping somebody. It's exactly the same. It's not okay, it's not understandable. It's exactly the same with coercion. Of course, we play potential non-consent games. Some of us do, some of us don't. Of course, we play games of coercion. You know, we're getting to the murky landscapes that we like to play. Of course, we like those games. But can we name them? Can we call them? Can we talk about them? Can we have discussions about them? If we can't, it's just like putting somebody in the back of the van and not doing that. So be really, really careful about that. Yeah? So in terms of being given, reversible, can we all change our minds?
Yes.
Yeah? Well, take this last time. Liked it yesterday. Well, I thought that's what you wanted. You said, you know, we can change our minds. What we like now might not be what we like tomorrow. We might have gone too far. We might have felt really fucking droppy when we did that scene. And he doesn't. We're going to stick to sharp. We're going to stick to staples. You know, we might have thought we wanted something and we changed our mind. I was really open in the last workshop. You know, I really like this. I'm going to have expecting. I might not fucking like it. I can change my mind then. It used to be my favourite. It's not now. Someone's not going to know it's not our favourite, by the way, unless we tell them. We have a responsibility to say, I want to reverse this thing, that was okay. But it is reversible. We can change our mind. We can go a little bit too far on the side and we don't want to do it again. Is it informed? Is our consent always informed? Is it? Got any parents in the room? Got any parents and live like the parents? How informed was that decision of our life? Mums, dads, everything in between. Fuck me.
My would go calls on contraceptives, so that's probably not.
Not even then. You know, how do you make informed decisions? I had no fucking idea. I thought I did. I mean, I'd read all the forums, and I knew I was going to be this sort of parent. And oh my god, I was going to look at it so much and more than I thought I was so proud of it. I was going to be fat. Oh, and I was going to say the positive that was informed. And some things cannot be informed, yeah? I lived in an MS relationship for a little while. Anybody done that? A what? MS relationship, so a relationship with an extremely strong DS dynamic. I had a relationship there for a while. We talked about informed consent, we talked about paternal enslavement, we talked about lots of things. I'm not going to sit here and be derogatory about that relationship. It's one of the greatest relationships in my life, and I have a lot of care and affection for the person I was in that relationship. Was it informed? Was it truly informed? Probably not. Probably not. It took me years to get out of that relationship. I didn't know how to work a bank card when I came out of it. I was absolutely dependent on somebody. We talk a lot now about how we undo that kind of Stockholm syndrome, that dependence that you have on somebody. It's talked about a lot more on forums and websites. And in fact, that type of relationship was very fashionable then. It's not so much anymore. It still happens. Obviously, it's still a huge part of our scene and our culture, but it's not as fashionable as it was. And I think, was that truly informed? There are some things that we cannot really get informed consent for because we don't know what the consequences will be. We can get as close as we can to it. Can I cane you though? No. Is there anybody who that can cane? Anybody happy for me to give them a stroke with the cane? Anyone? Just one? Yeah? I'll give you one stroke with the cane. Great. Have you watched Singapore caning on the internet? Do you know what it looks like? They put you on a thing and they strap you down and they have a Singapore cane and you die from about 12 of them usually, maybe 24 if you really look. That one kitten stroke now, it's one of them, alright. I mean, people who die to 12, what do you want? What do you think? God. No, I changed my mind. So, I mean, again, I'm missing on it, but that's the point that I'm making here, you know. We talk about, do you like flogging? Do you like him? Do you like fisting? Do you like needles? There's someone who says, I like needles. I'm looking too much at it. I really like needles. How I like needles and how you like needles might be really different. I like to shoot about 50 needles through your genitals if you let me, if you know me, if you trust me. You might want 1 or 2 through your back. You know, what do we mean when we use words? Language is so important. You know, I like X, I like wax. You just had a wax down here. What does wax mean? Use an amazing, intricate wax play. You know, you can do wax that has temperature controlled chemicals that are fab, that are sensual, that are aromatic. One of the worst scenes I ever had was a fucking wax scene with someone who didn't know what they were doing. It was too hot, it was too close. Well, I've still got the burn mark. Literally, I've still got the burn mark. It's like sold around. It's awful. But we think, oh yeah, I'll do wax. Wax is lovely. So what are we considering to do now? Somebody says to me, we do wax. I'm like, yeah, but I want to see what candles you do first. If you're going to use those ones from IKEA, fucking no. Not happening. Right? What do we mean with the language that we use? You were going to say something. Okay. Yeah.
I was, but I've jumped tracks and forgotten what I was going to say again now.
Enthusiastic. do we mean by enthusiastic?
They actually genuinely want it.
They actually genuinely want it. And that's what I mean by that. I mean, in that quadrant, what do they want? That's really, really important. What do they want? However, we say no, 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 no all the time, don't we? No, don't want that. No, Daddy, don't do that to me. Daddy, no, it hurts. I'm enthusiastically telling her, you know it hurts. How the fuck do we know the difference? How do we know the difference? Well, Daddy doesn't know. But the point that I'm making is enthusiasm means that we want it. What are our motivations? We are getting something out of this. This is ultimately really, really important to us. It's what we want to make us. I'm not going to say to make us wet because that is a misnomer. You know, we all get wet with things that we don't want. What I mean is psychologically, this is something that I am really, really into. I am getting off on this. I love this. I am enthusiastically consented, and I have found somebody who is prepared to do this with me. And therefore, I'm either in a committed relationship with them and I'm going to love them forever, or I'm traveling to have a scene with them because we've negotiated it and we both really want it, or they're a friend of mine and we've got really similar kinks and we have a laugh and we get on and we're going to do a thing. You know, there's no one size fits all in terms of where we do this enthusiastic shit. However, we have to really, really want it. And we go back to quotient. If there's something there that is secondary, we talk about secondary gain. If there's something there that's secondary, that's motivating this, that can be okay, but it can be not okay. But what it does need is it needs to be named and it needs to be understood and it needs to be talked about. And I think that's really, really important.
But yeah, just like I was saying before about when you're asking to like take someone's hand, it's like you can easily just like say yes, which I think is a bit of a comfort blanket. It's like yeah, the agreeing to something. Well, how I perceive that is like the small mirrors of that going, yes, I would like you to take my hand. Like hearing that is like somebody that I've considered it, I've listened to it, and I'm mirroring back the request to really show that I've understood it and liked it rather than it just being yes, because yes can be a protective thing rather than yeah. Like
And they could
mirroring
be really, really passionate. It's interesting. So these two people who I picked out and who I know one and I don't know the other, I put my hand out for one of them and they took my hand. And there was no context to that. It was just, give my hand. I put a hand up to someone I've never met before and I go, right, understand. You can really say that. You don't have to. It's a lot of pressure, you know. I'm going to involve you in these workshops. I'm picking someone out of orders and saw you in half. You know, those things are all staged, aren't there? There's a lot of pressure. There might be lots of reasons why people don't want the limelight. Is that secondary reassurance that you really can't, it's really okay, I'll move on to somebody else. Why do we do that? We do that because it's important to do that. We didn't do that there, we feel the need to do that there. And it's about the interpersonal relationship you have with someone. And the less of a relationship you have, the more words you need to use. That's basically what that little thing demonstrates. The greater the relationship, the less words you get away with. That's kind of the easiest way that I have to demonstrate that. Yeah? So talk. Specific, I've touched on this anyway, having our own workshop already, but specific. Can I cater you? Yeah, you can, definitely. I want to cater you like this. Not so much. How are you with anal play? Oh yeah, I like a bit of anal. I get my gnome out. I've got a gnome. I love my gnome. My nose is the favourite thing in the world. I'm giving too much away here on out. Gnome comes out to play. Oh no, I thought you were going to peg me up on those lovely little Indonesian dildos in your strap on, and we were going to have a lovely scene. I've got a lovely little unicorn. Sorry. That's what I thought you meant when you said anal. Oh no, the gnome's coming out tonight. We're still doing anal. We're not doing anal funny enough when the gnome comes out. However, that's not good. You know, we use terminology all the time. We use language, but we have to be really specific about what it's up to. You know, what are we doing? Can I remember saying to somebody, I don't do canes, I absolutely don't do canes, I do not do canes are fucking horrible. I've done this a long time at this point, actually quite a lot of time. No, I'm going to do something called twilting. I don't fucking do canes, I hate canes, I'm fucking horrible, I don't feel canes. Trust me, with a cane. Not sure I do. Okay, we know each other, we played a few times, we like each other, you can get the cane. If they showed me what twilting was, rather than use a word that I didn't know what it meant, I would have been fine with that a lot sooner. Actually, I really like canes now. I really do, but I only like a very, very specific sort of cane, with a specific sort of person in a specific sort of way. Specific is really, really, really important. What do we mean when we want to do something? Road, what do we mean? You know, suspension is not the same as rope, it's the same as on floors, it's the same as, you know, I'm in time walk and I'm going to the basement for hours. You know, all of that's rope, but it's very, very different. What do you do? Does that make sense to people in terms of specific, in terms of size?
You've got 7 minutes left.
Has anybody got any questions for me in terms of anything that I cover? I know people are going to ask questions. Anything about particularly the specifics of negotiation or how we negotiate or what we do to negotiate? Yeah.
How, if you, I know, like, as a, me personally as a woman, but I know it's not
Yeah.
every time it's just women, actually, like, struggling to say no for fear of, like, ruining a moment or just, like, not actually being able to, like, get out of that, like, I'm actually not liking this, can you do something else?
I'm going to be really controversial. I'm really sorry I'm going to upset you.
No.
But I do ultimately think if we're in a position where we can't say no, and I get people feel that we can't say no for lots of different reasons, we should really question whether we should be in that position. That's my first, very personal statement, and I get that
It's
might
like with a negative, like, partners,
So I think if you have real difficulties with no, be owning it and accepting it and stating it is really important. I think we should question what we're doing. Yeah. Obviously, certain sorts of play, that's very much within the comfort zone. Brilliant. Once we start getting to things that we might be uncomfortable with, they're unknowns, or they're pushing the envelope of what we've done before, or they're towards our boundaries. If we're saying, I really struggle to say no, I would question if we should be playing there. Until, I'm not going to, that's not forever, it's not full stop there. Until we've done a little bit of work on our ability to say no. What I will say is, we should practice saying no. Like, I say no all the fucking time. Like, no, full stop, with a capital letter, with a full stop, capital letter, with full stop again. God, I'm making pigs with that sentence, and does everyone know what I'm talking about? No, with the capital letter and a full stop at the end of it is a complete sentence, guys, right? Are we all saying it regularly? Will you do that overtime shift? Do you know what it should have been? No. Not, no, I'm really sorry, I can't because. Not, no, I've got to do this. No, I would, I really want to, but just fucking no, right? Just start saying no. Start with the easy stuff. Start with your best friends, the people that you trust, the people that you know are going to make you drink. No. Do you want to be the man you drink? No. Can you babysit for me on Friday? Would you do this? No. It's really, really, really uncomfortable to do that, right? It really is hard, it's still hard for me to do. We want to explain why we can't, we want to appreciate ourselves, we want to apologise. Stop apologising for our nerves. Stop apologising for our boundaries. Stop apologising for the love heart that we draw around ourselves again and slowly that seal off the snapshot. It's really, really, really important that you're comfortable with those love hearts. Yeah? Protect them, they belong to us. Once you're in a position where you can say no, and there's lots of ways that we can practice that, the skills that we can have if you're not familiar with DBT, literally Google DBT saying no, and it will come up with lots of actions that will support you and help you go about doing that, yeah? Once you're at the stage where you find it easier to say no, and you set yourself a goal, I mean it, I'm going to say no 3 times this week, and then you're going to document where you did it, you're writing it down, saying, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times this week, I'm going to drink 2 litres of water. You're literally going to do it, you're going to hold yourself accountable for doing it. Once you can do that, you say, right, I'm going to do this as part of this. Just once, I'm going to put it into a seed, and I'm going to say no. Once you're comfortable doing that with that partner, you have a really good system for doing that, you start pushing that envelope. Maybe you say no by holding something and dropping it rather than your words, because your words is different. Maybe you say no by having a colour system. My no is amber, because in actual fact, I struggle with no. There's more than one way of saying it. Think about how you're saying it, get comfortable saying it, then get to the position where you might need to say it, not the other way around. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So practicing it in other areas of life
Yeah.
as well.
Because it's transferable skill. All this stuff, interpersonal communication is so transferable, you know. And if you're really struggling to say no, why? There'll be some reason why I'm struggling to say no at the minute. I've owned it. I said I'm struggling. I'm really struggling. I need to look at that. I know why that is. I've got a lot of stress in my life at the moment. You know, I know, and I'm aware of that, and I'm doing something about it. Do you know what I'm doing? I'm going to storm wall. That's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do all these things. If you're at a period now where you're struggling to say no, why? What's going on? If that's always the case, always like that, what are you doing about it? Start by saying no. Have a no journal. Some of us have a food dinner, have a no journal. Yeah?
I was going to reiterate the point on the practicing saying no, but actually, if you have a problem saying no, and you're in a committed relationship, ask the person that you're with to thank you for saying no, because then you actually build this system where you are, oh my God, I'm going to say that thing that I'm societally conditioned not to say, but you're actually being thanked for saying it, because then from the other person's perspective, in their head, oh my God, I've got to know. I don't have to worry about that being withdrawn later or uncomfortable. It's kind of confirmed something. So please, if you're with a partner who has an issue with it, reinforce that by saying thank you for saying no.
What I will say, and I agree with what James said, and I agree to the sentiment. What I will say to add a little bit of context is I think it's really important to incentivize no's, but not safe words. I don't like the idea of people,
Yeah.
there's a real difference. There's a difference between a no and playing to a red. Does that make sense? And I don't think we should continue to play to reds. I think that's different. What we're saying is it's okay to say no. In actual fact, I'm going to reward you for saying no. I use this analogy all the time with compliments. Some people find it really difficult to pay them a compliment. And what do they say? Oh, no, you are. Don't see. Oh, this top is fine. Don't be daft. They give you a back, don't they? They throw it back at you. I don't want to compliment. I say to people all the time, that shit you get at Christmas from work, from school, and kids bring it back or wherever it is, somebody's taken the time to spend a fiver, put it in a brand tub or a Secret Santa box, whatever they've done, they wrapped it up, put a bow on it, they brought it for you, you open it. 99.9% of the time it's not something you want. You're going to give it away, you're going to re-gift it, you're going to send it to a charity shop. You don't open it and go, fucking hell, that back's off, you don't chuck it in somebody. It's a gift they've given you and they've taken the time to buy that shit from the body shop that you don't want to use, right? You say thank you. That's a skill. Practice saying thank you in relationships. Practice saying when somebody pays you a compliment, just something kind, something nice, you say thank you. You say no. Somebody says, you pick where we do. Oh my God, 3 submissive people do neurotypical facts where we're going to eat. Where we're going to eat. You could be standing there starving to death before somebody decides where to eat, right? Show up. You're thinking where we're going to eat today, you're thinking where we're going to eat next week, and you're thinking where we're going to eat the next time. Because we all know otherwise it's dangerous, we're going to starve to death. If those are skills, interpersonal skills that we find difficult, be it no, be it making decisions, be it advocating for yourself, your wants, your wishes, your needs, be it taking compliments, practice what we're going to do about that stuff. How do we build receptors with it? All really important skills in terms of knowing our quadrant so that we can better clear on communication. Does that make sense for everyone? Thank you so much for your time today and for attending the workshop. It's been absolutely lovely. It was the first one that I've been, so please be nice with your TripAdvisor reviews, and I will see you all next time. Now than they were at the beginning. So for anybody who is comfortable in taking a photo in front of this and putting it on Facebook or LAMchester have kindly said that we'll do a draw of everybody who brings it, and there'll be a £50 LAM cash prize at the next LAMchester for you to spend on whatever you like if you're happy to do that. Because we really, really do advocate people attending these workshops that are about communication and content. It's one thing to attend one about a skill in terms of BDSM, but it's quite nice to attend this one. So if you'd like to, feel free.